Hello to everybody tuning into today's episode. Today I wanted to focus on purpose and kind of connect that to my last episode about identity. But today will be the first episode that I've recorded back in Baltimore since leaving Chicago for a break. So let's get started. So kind of getting right into it. Before I go any further, I kind of wanted to just say thank you to everybody that's been tuning in and listening ever since I've dropped the first episode. I've honestly gotten so much love and positive feedback generally and support, and I wanted to say that I really do appreciate it. It means a lot, and it's something that I do hold very dearly, so I wanted to say thank you to everybody that's been tuned in from day one, whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. I really do appreciate it. And the support has definitely kind of reevaluated how I've looked at myself and how I look at this podcast, and kind of getting so much positive feedback has definitely encouraged me to keep it going. I've actually had a lot of people who have they kind of just asked if they could guest star and everything, and my answer's been the same to pretty much everybody, which is, if you want to guest star, you can let me know, text me, shoot me a DM, whatever. But I definitely did want to kind of have this be a podcast, not necessarily just for me, but for anybody who's kind of interested in or listening, because I kind of wanted it to be just a calm space in a sense where anybody could share their ideas, share their stories, or anything that they felt really strongly about in a sense. So in terms of wanting to have guest stars, I welcome anybody and everybody. If you really want to hop on here, just let me know. We can arrange that and we can sort out the details. If there's a specific topic that you'd like to talk about or anything that interests you, we can focus on that. But I definitely just wanted to reiterate that even though this is my own personal podcast and project that I've been working on, I kind of enjoy the opportunity to be able to share it with everybody that's listening. So in a sense, it's not just my podcast, but one for the people as well. And kind of ever since I started recording and gotten the feedback generally, it's kind of given me more motivation to keep going. And I've definitely felt myself having a lot more excitement about the potential of this podcast and where it could take off. And I think that definitely is something that ties into my topic for today, which is purpose. I feel like doing this podcast has given me more of a sense of purpose. Not to say that I didn't already have one, but it was kind of a pleasant surprise in a sense of how much I enjoy doing it. And I think seeing the feedback I've gotten has kind of encouraged me to keep it going more so, not even just for myself, but because I feel like people really do enjoy it. And I guess people enjoy listening to my voice. So I guess I'll keep recording episodes, keep dropping them. And But on to today's general topic of purpose. I think purpose to me has definitely had a lot of different definitions throughout my life in a sense, because I feel like I haven't always had a sense of purpose, and that's something that I feel I've been very honest about myself with overall, because I think my own purpose was not something that I realized until more recently in my life, probably within the last couple of years. And I think that purpose overall is something that you don't really realize in a sense. You don't know what your purpose is until it kind of just hits you right in the face. And I think that once you discover what your purpose is or what you feel you're meant to do or called to do, I feel that life often just aligns perfectly after, in a sense, because when you move and you take actions that are in line with your purpose, it just feels very natural in a sense. Like, it feels as if you're not forcing anything, and it feels that everything happens as it should. And I think that sense of fulfillment and peace is something that truly, at least for me, made my life much more, it just felt so much more real and authentic. And I think that another thing with purpose too is that sometimes it can change in different stages of your life. I feel like when I was younger, I just didn't really, maybe I had a purpose, but I didn't know what it was. So I feel that a lot of the actions and decisions that I would take were much more unintentional in a sense, and I didn't really evaluate them as much. So I would kind of be acting, maybe not carelessly, but not as intentionally as I could have. But fortunately, it did work out, and I think that in order to find your purpose, you kind of need to have a semblance of identity, and that kind of entails taking the time to get to know yourself. And I feel that one of the things that definitely helped me to, I guess, stay more aligned and intentional after I found my purpose was definitely being a bit more focused on the religious aspect of it, and kind of thinking to myself, I guess, what purpose does God have for me, or what is it that I can do for others in a sense. And I think that with that, there's a multitude of ways that you can accomplish what it is you feel that your purpose is. So for example, let's say now I feel that this podcast could be part of my larger purpose to inspire and motivate change within people. And part of that with purpose is that when you commit to it and you act purposefully, you kind of feel more natural, like nothing feels forced. And that's definitely, I feel, one of the reasons why I feel a lot more accomplished when I record an episode or start filming and everything. And I think that sense of accomplishment is something that you definitely should take into account, because there are a lot of actions that we can take on a day-to-day basis, but in all honesty, not all of them may leave us feeling fulfilled. Like, I definitely have a lot of days where I'm just kind of not really productive. Maybe I didn't get my reading done, or maybe I kind of just stayed in the house and was just like bed rotting for most of the day. And afterwards, you kind of feel maybe as if you wasted the day. There's some potential wasted there. But being able to act intentionally doesn't necessarily mean that you are on go like 100% of the time. There's always off days. Like, sometimes there's just bad days, weeks, months. I can say, like, personally, in the last 6 months, in like the later half of 2025, I definitely did have a very rough couple of months. And with that, it was more so just a lot of personal things that I had going on in my life. And it definitely was one of the toughest times that I've had probably ever. And I think that kind of being in that season of just pretty much like very low energy and motivation, I think that kind of definitely impacted my day-to-day routine and functioning. And I feel like that maybe I wasn't as aligned with my purpose as I normally would be. But one thing to remember is that at the end of the day, it's a season, and seasons always come and go. It could be a down season now, but in a couple months, it could be the best season you've had in a couple years. And I think with seasons too, the main thing to focus on is emotions, like emotions and thoughts. Because even though emotions and thoughts kind of dominate our like minds, like day to day, like you always have something you're thinking about, it there's something that's really stressing you. As much as they cover your mind and you are constantly thinking about it and you can't get it out of your head, those thoughts are always fleeting. They're always very temporary in a sense. The thoughts will come and go, they'll come and they'll pass, but there's no thought that often will stay with you permanently. You have different thoughts every day. You could be thinking about what you want for lunch now, and then in a couple hours not even be hungry anymore. So in a sense, it's good to know that those thoughts and emotions that you might have, no matter how debilitating or overpowering that they may seem, there's always relief. Though, granted, sometimes if there's something that's much more pressing, it stays on your mind longer. But at the end of the day ends, and the time passes, and the thoughts will pass too. And I think that kind of having a greater awareness of this allows you to be able to weather the storm in a sense, be able to weather the seasons, because you know that this moment right now, whether it's a down moment, whether it's high, you know that often you come back to a baseline. There's always an average of life. It has highs and its lows. So being able to know that maybe I don't feel the best right now, maybe I don't feel the best for the next couple weeks, but there will be a redistribution. There will be a way to swing it back up. And it's all about being able to weather the storm and kind of await the peak that comes. And with that, that's kind of helped me with motivation and discipline too, because I think a big misconception that I had before with purpose, like I said, is that in order to have a purpose, you have to be motivated 100% of the time. But you can't do that. Motivation comes and goes very much like thoughts and feelings do. And I think it's really discipline at the end of the day, and the discipline to be able to still act intentionally and do things even when you don't want to do them. Because ultimately, it's not motivation that kind of pushes you through, it's discipline. Discipline to be able to weather those bad seasons, those storms, and know that when the sun comes out, when you are feeling better, you'll get the job done. Kind of being able to hold off and allow yourself to take a breather until you get back on track. And I think how I think about it for my own situation and knowing where I've been at the last couple of months, it's kind of been a reversal of fortune in a sense, because I'd say I was definitely in a very low spot a couple months ago, and I kind of just was being tested in a sense in how long I could weather the storm, because it felt as if my storm was never going to pass, as if I would be stuck in the rain forever. But kind of looking at things now, where new year, new me, I have this personal project that I've been starting that I really want to do, and the fact that sometimes if you don't feel that storm is ending or that season is going to come, sometimes you have to take control of it, be the maker of your own destiny in a sense. And I think something that I definitely was exhibiting is it's a concept called learned helplessness. And what it entails mostly is that when you have somebody who is kind of subjected to repeated negative experiences over and over again, and they're unpredictable in a sense, so you can't even try to prepare yourself for it, you kind of develop this feeling of helplessness in a sense, kind of just like, woe is me, and you kind of just learn to accept the bad things that happen and not even try to shift it, like determine your fate, your destiny, kind of try to fight against the storm in a sense, And I think that was definitely in a spot where I was in, where I definitely had kind of just really accepted things as they came, and I was kind of living life in like autopilot in a sense, not really putting as much effort into things, but kind of just trying to get past the storm, kind of just putting my head down and just doing this, and this, doing what I needed to do without really trying to fight back, and kind of just accepting what I felt was my fate. But now it's been about like 3 to 4 months later, and I'm on the whole other side of the spectrum now, where I feel much better, and I feel more like myself, and I feel more aligned. And it was kind of a reminder that seasons change, seasons shift, and it's often surprising how quickly it can happen. And sometimes you don't realize that you're no longer in the storm until things are looking really bright, in a sense. And there's always a new door that opens. But like I said, sometimes you have to be the one to find the door and try to open it, rather than kind of waiting for it to open. And that's what I decided to do with this podcast. It was kind of just a door that I had seen, and it was there for a while, but I kind of felt like maybe it wasn't the time, or I'll get to that door later, I'll get to it later. But then it was pretty much one of the only doors around, and I was like, why not? Why not now? Why not open this door? And I think opening the door and stepping into a new room and a new light is definitely something that has helped me quite a lot. And these are some conversations that I've had with a lot of people since releasing the first episode, and just being able to get more feedback and hearing what people think of it. But honestly, sometimes you can be your own biggest critic. I know I am at times, and I definitely am guilty of that. And I've always definitely been someone who tries to be more humble, like tries to be more modest, but at the same time that can often be at the cost of your own success in a sense. And I think for me, that's why I had become so accustomed to, like hearing praise from other people means a lot in a sense. And I feel like it does for everybody, But I think for a long time, I would never sing those praises to myself, which is something that is honestly a lot more powerful than you realize. Because once you realize that life is what you make of it, it can often be like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense. If you tell yourself that you're going to fail, or I'm not going to do well on this exam, or I'm going to fail this interview, or I won't do well at this job, then you've already kind of planted that seed of doubt in your mind, and nobody else has forced you into it. You've already taken a step back for yourself. And the issue with that is if you let that seed fester and grow, then it often encompasses you, and it becomes more than a seed, and it will just develop you and engulf your whole personality in a sense. So then that one tiny seed of doubt can grow into a huge tree of just despair in a sense, And when you have that much doubt over yourself, and it covers that much of who you are, then it starts to show in your actions, not being able to be as intentional or just take actions because you kind of fear failure. And I will say, I failed so many times. I still fail to this day. And I think that fear of failure is something that has definitely held me back for quite some time. And at times it still does. But that fear of failure, of being wrong, and sometimes it's just to myself. But with having a fear of failure, I think that the fear of failure is to admit that you don't know something, to kind of accept the possibility that I might be wrong about this, or I might not be as educated as I thought. And I think that there comes a point in time where you kind of just have to accept that you don't know everything. You can't know everything. And kind of holding yourself back from failing is, in a sense, just holding you back from succeeding as well. Because, like we said, with different seasons, they come and they go. There's seasons of success and prosperity, and then there's seasons of failure. You can't have one without the other. So, in a sense, when you rob yourself of failing in kind of that season of failure, you kind of prolong or possibly just altogether prevent the fruitful season that may come afterwards. And I think right now I'm definitely in a better season. I'd say right now I'm feeling like this is a pretty successful season. But I could wake up tomorrow or next week and things could take a bad turn. I could be back right where I was a couple months ago. But that's okay, because a couple months after that, I'll be right where I am now. And sometimes it takes longer, but you do get there. Everybody gets there. There's no expiration date for success, And I think with success too, success is often self-defined. What is it that you feel makes you successful? Is it following your purpose? Is it being influential, rich, whatever it may be? Success is what you define it as. So what that means is it's self-determined. So ultimately, if you view yourself as successful or in aligned with your purpose, then you are, because you can determine whether you feel or not you're successful, and it's according to your standards. Now, granted, I mean, there's objective definitions of success, if that means like having money, having a nice house, having a stable paying job. Those are things that we all strive for and able to sustain ourselves. But where that comes into it is if you have a nice house, if you're making good enough money, if you can support yourself financially, but you still don't feel successful, then that might just imply that that is not all that success means to you. That could be part of your vision of success, but that's not your whole definition. And that's where you would have to evaluate what your purpose is. Because I can say, like, personally, when I had graduated and I was working full time and I had a job, like, it was a good job. I was able to work, have my own apartment, save my own money. And by any means at that point, I was successful. I found a job, considering how difficult this job market has been. I was able to move out, live on my own, support myself, pay my bills just fine. But deep down, I definitely still felt like there was something missing. And I think that was because I didn't have that same sense of purpose, that definition of success that I wanted. In all other aspects, financially, I was successful. Professionally, I had a job that was really good. But mentally, emotionally, I didn't feel the same success. And it's interesting now because I feel that I've been on the other end of things, because now I'm back in school. I feel more aligned. I have a much better social life. I have friends that I care for. I have people around me, in a sense. And maybe I definitely don't have the finances I had before, but I still feel successful because I know that it'll come back. Maybe not in this season, maybe not in the next season, but eventually I can get back to that and even surpass that. That's another thing that I've kind of learned. If you accomplish something once, you can do it again because you already have the blueprint for it. You already have the formula. It's a lot easier to do something for the second time than to do it for the first time. So if you've been successful once, you can do it again. Granted, it may not be easy, like it may not be simple, but you know that you're capable of it. And this is something that I was thinking about because I had a conversation with my dad recently when I was on the phone with him. And something that he had told me that kind of stuck with me was that he had said that you need to convince yourself that you deserve success and that things will work, because I feel that a lot of times people will often just say, oh, like my time is coming, this and that, like you kind of wait for the results and expect the results, but maybe you don't put in the work in a sense. But I've definitely had the other issue where I sometimes don't expect success for myself, even if I've been like working and I've been like grinding and like really working as hard as I can and I've been focused. But with that, I think for me, that thought process stems back to kind of the thought process I had before where maybe success is something that is not in the cards for me right now. And I would kind of have the expectation of failure, which was something that also held me back from releasing this podcast. But now that I've done it, and I feel that it is a success right now, even if it's not charting or if it's not ranking up on like the billboards and everything, I still feel successful because I feel that is in line with my purpose, and I have a kind of hope for it in a sense. I have the belief that this will work out, If I don't get any more listeners from this point on, I still will feel like I've succeeded because I know that out of the people that have listened to it so far, And a lot of them are people whose opinions that I hold highly and who I care for. I know that if it did something for them, I could care less who else listens to it, whether it does something for them, whether it doesn't. As long as it was well received by somebody, I know that I set out to do the goal that I wanted, which was to inspire. And I've kind of found more inspiration from other people in a sense. Like in the conversations I've had, I've talked with a lot of people, and with most of them saying that, oh yeah, like I really like the idea for the podcast. I think it should be cool. It kind of inspires me to make sure that I stay committed to it, like I stay focused and that I can be consistent with it because I know that it's doing something, it's providing inspiration. And it's kind of beautiful how it works out both ways, how I went out of my way to share something, kind of be open and honest, and it was received positively. And that is what encourages me to keep on going and putting more out there, because I know that there is somebody who enjoys it. And that was something that really kind of motivated me to release this podcast, because I had saw a quote somewhere that was saying, I don't remember it exactly, but it was something along the lines of, you don't know what impact you could have if you never take the action, in a sense. And with this podcast, it was more so like, there might be somebody out there who needs to hear what I have to say, or is going through a situation in their life where they might need some kind of input, some kind of insight. And if I have the answers and I refuse to share it, even if I don't know, that could still, provide some comfort and some support. And so I thought to myself, what if there are people out there? What if there's somebody out there who could really use what I have to say, in a sense? So who am I to kind of not offer my help, Because I think with human experience and life in general, it's a very universal experience. Like, granted, we don't all live the same lives, and we all have our own stories and people. There are aspects of it that are like kind of common. There's some shared experiences. There are lessons that need to be learned. And sometimes, if you're fortunate enough, you don't have to learn that lesson yourself, and you can learn it through somebody else. And that saves you failure. Like, that is one of the few times where you don't have to fail in order to succeed, being able to learn from others and their experiences. It's kind of like, and if you're having like a situation, or you go on Google and you search something and you see somebody who made a post on Reddit from like 12 years ago, and it's the exact same situation that you had, and it's like, oh, problem solved. All I had to do was go find it, and somebody else, somewhere else, had the same exact issue that I did, word for word. And that was what I told somebody. I was like, I wanted to be like Reddit, in a sense, like being able to share my stories or other people's stories, like when I have guests, and being able to let other people know that oftentimes when you do deal with something and you're going through like a situation, oftentimes it feels like it's really only happening to you, and you can often feel as if nobody else will understand what you've been through, the emotions you have, the thoughts you're thinking. But granted, that doesn't take away from the fact that they are unique to you. Like, that does not make your pain or your emotions any less real. But I feel like it does provide some solace and comfort that there's somebody else who has been there and who has come back from it, and that shows you that you can come back from it too. But ultimately, even if you were to go through the same experience as somebody else, there's no guarantee that it shapes you both the same way. I think I had a professor, he had said something, he was like, we were talking about like in the context of like nature versus nurture. It was like the same water that softens the ramen hardens the egg, or something like that. which in a sense is that even if you experience the same things as other people, that doesn't necessarily mean that those experiences will shape you the same way, you know? And I think that's how it is with seasons, you know? Like that can be your testimony. Because you can either have those down seasons, either you let it break you and you kind of develop the habit of learned helplessness and kind of just letting life control you as it goes, or you take the stand, you know, take power, and you decide, no, I'm not a victim. Like, this is my life, and even though this is not how I want things to go right now, even though this is maybe one of the worst seasons I've had in a while, it's not going to last, and you weather the storm. Life is often more so influenced by what you do in response to the events that happen to you rather than the events that happen to you. I mean, granted, like, we can't see the future, and you can't control everything that happens to you in a sense. But the real power in it lies in what happens when life hits you. Do you take the punch and sit down, or do you get up and do you fight back? Because one thing about life is that there will always be punches. Like, there's always something that's going to happen. And that's something I was reminded of, like, in the last couple months, where I was like, something bad would happen, and then something else, and then something else, and I'm kind of just sitting there like, can I get a timeout? Can I get a break? Like, this is back to back to back, like, no breaks. I need to catch my breath. And it really can discourage you, you know? But that is what builds resilience, you know? I had a coworker of mine, he had said, with faith, he said, faith can't be trusted if it can't be tested. And that was something that really spoke to me, because I feel with faith, not even just in a sense of religion only, but just with faith in general, like faith in yourself, if you do not test that faith, because faith is the belief in things that you do not know. You can't have faith in something if you know it's going to happen, you know? So with faith, it's how can you truly know you have faith if it isn't tested, you know? At the end of the day, that's not faith, that's just belief, because you know things will turn around. But with faith, it is when you have no reason to have faith, no reason to have hope, and you keep going, that is when you know that your faith is strong, that your faith is true. Because if you do not test that faith, then how do you know it's really faith? At that point, it might as well just be knowledge, you know? And faith is definitely something that you rely on a lot more. And I know for me, when I was in that like little low season, that I definitely had turned back to God more often. And I definitely was praying more, because I kind of had gotten to the point where I was just like, I don't know what to do anymore. You know, like, I'm at my wit's end, I'm taking punches left and right, and there's nothing else for me to do. And I think that when I had my back turned against the wall and I was kind of dealing with things on my own, not to say that I didn't have people who I could turn to and I could talk to, because I definitely had a lot of people who offered their support, but it was something that I felt that I needed to do on my own, in a sense. And oftentimes there's nobody who will pull you out of that hole but yourself. Like, sometimes you have to dig your way out. And once you overcome that challenge and you dig yourself out, that is what shows resilience. That shows what shows faith. That shows character. That even when you were at the lowest point that you were at, and there was nobody to rely on but yourself and God, and when you get out of that pit, you kind of realize that you have more power than you know. And I think that being able to kind of turn to God in that sense, because I felt like I didn't have anybody but myself. Like it was nobody's job but my own to pull myself up and to look for answers and to kind of have the strength to do so. That fosters resilience. That shows you what strength is. And back to the thing with the seasons. You need to have low seasons in order to be able to go back up. There's the average of life. And this was something that I had heard, I think when I had went to church a while ago. And it kind of changed the way that I saw life in a sense, especially after the season that I just had. So pretty much what I think like the priest had said was that if you think about like a building, right? A building or a mountain or a huge great structure, whatever it may be, right? Let's say if you want to build a building, you can't just build it, like you can't just build like one singular like piece and just go straight up because it's too flimsy. It won't get very high because it doesn't have a solid enough foundation to hold it steady and hold it still, right? And how he had related it to, I guess, life in a sense was more so like you can only go so high if you don't have a foundation, right? And what those foundations and peaks, like the top and the bottom, what they represent is life in a sense, right? You can't just jump straight to the moon. You can't go straight to the moon if you haven't been down to the ground first, right? There's no way for you can't just be successful like that. Success is not something that can just happen overnight. Oftentimes it takes time, takes hours, takes patience, it takes resilience. And oftentimes, sometimes people don't know they're successful until they're standing right there in the moment. And you don't realize how much work and how much time it took you to get to that point. And how that looks is like when you're building a structure, whether that's a skyscraper or whatever, you cannot just go straight to the top, because as soon as the next gust of wind comes, as soon as the next storm or terrible season comes, it just falls flat back to the ground, because that is not true success. True success comes from hours and hours and a lot of time spent building that foundation or being at the bottom, right? Because failure is what sets you up for success. So if you've spent a lot of time maybe not having the highest of highs, like not great peaks, but some level of success, you often stay closer to the ground, building that foundation. And when you fail, you spend a lot of time at the ground level, at the base level, building that foundation, learning from those failures, learning from those mistakes. And it is through building on those failures and building on those mistakes and taking meaning of it, finding purpose out of those shortcomings, that you can build that foundation. And once you build that foundation, then you can go a bit higher. But if you'd like to go higher, you need a stronger foundation. And hopefully you one day get to the point where your foundation is so strong, so wide, that you can build as high as you'd like, whether that's to the moon or maybe not even as high. But you have the foundation to know that whatever storm comes, whatever season comes, whatever wind blows, that your structure, your life is sound, it's resilient, it stands the test of time, because you know that all of those times that you spent much lower at the base, building that foundation, strengthening it, regardless of whether or not you knew you were strengthening it, you made that foundation, you made that base, and you built yourself up, And that honestly changed my perspective on failure as a whole, because pretty much showed me that in order to go up, you first have to start somewhere. You can't just jump straight to the top floor. There's a process to it. There's a process to life. And sometimes you can get lucky. Sometimes you can jump up a few levels, have some level of success. But in order to keep it, you need to maybe start building from the foundation up there. If you try to build super high without having a strong foundation, when you're tested, when your faith is tested by the wind or whatever season comes, when that tests you and you don't have a foundation because you don't feel you need one, then it kind of leads you into the path of kind of helplessness in a sense, because you aren't really sure. You had the success, but you didn't have the hours, the trials, the tribulations to show for it. So how will you know how to get back there if it was by luck, you know? And I don't say that to say that you have to like suffer for years and years on end in order to finally succeed. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm trying to say is that if maybe you aren't met with success as quickly as you hope, don't be discouraged in a sense. You know, very often people don't get it right the first time. And when you don't get it right the first time, you learn a lesson. Just because you don't get it right the first time doesn't mean you won't get it right the second or the third. It's the process of being able to try and continue even when all hope seems lost or it seems too difficult. There was this book that I had read a while ago. It was called As a Man Thinketh. And one of the quotes that was in the book was that all that you achieve and all that you fail to achieve is a direct result of your thoughts. And that kind of goes back to the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe you deserve success and you take the time to work and you don't let the failure discourage you, one day success will find you. And success is what you make of it. But if you feel that failure is what finds you and you kind of accept that failure is what is meant for you and you don't take the meaning out of it or you don't learn from it, then often that is what finds you. Life is what you make of it, and you will be what you will to be, if that makes sense. What you tell yourself is what you act as, and those actions are what determine how your life unfolds. And granted, you can't control everything that happens in life, but your actions determine how your response to things. So even if life may not be what you want it to be right now, that doesn't mean it won't always. That doesn't mean that it will always be like this. You know, one day, before you realize it, you'll be living a dream that you had a while ago, and it will kind of shock you and surprise you because maybe it was something that you had forgot about or something that you weren't expecting. But if you stay down and continue to find that purpose and live in alignment with what it is that you would like to get out of life, you know, pretty much work with the purpose that you feel is meant for you, that you're destined to do, then you find yourself walking down that path. And once you walk down that path, it's just you. Sure, you'll meet people on the path, but that path is nobody's path to take but yours. And yeah, sometimes there will be people there who weather with you through some storms, through some seasons, but ultimately that path you take of life is one that is specific to you. And I think that having that purpose helps you find that path. And once you find that path of life, you walk it as far as you're destined to go, in a sense. But with living in line with that purpose, you are on the right path. And when you see other people's paths, it can be tempting when you see it because it might seem more appealing, but you don't know what seasons or what obstacles they had to go through to get to that point in their path. And who's to say that your path doesn't have more than that. If you continue to go down it, ultimately your life is yours to live. And granted, sometimes when you're on that path, you want to take a break, you want to take a breather, and that's perfectly fine. Sometimes there's those days where you just don't have the energy, but that's why you get back up and you try again the next day or the one after that. The path often isn't very clear, and it can be confusing because that's often how life is. You don't know where the path leads, you don't know where it's going, but you know that you must walk it. And that experience in itself is something that builds you into who it is you're meant to be and kind of helps you to find that purpose for yourself. And I think that as I've gone down my path and kind of learned to enjoy the journey more, it's kind of helped me to, I guess, encourage more people to do the same. Because oftentimes when you're on the path and you're in a low season, you kind of expect that season to remain for the rest of your path. But that's not the case. The storm could clear up just farther down that path. But I've kind of wanted to inspire, in a sense, to take that path, go at it with excitement, because that path, ultimately, every step you take, even if it feels farther, every step you take brings you closer to the end of that path. And you don't know where the end leads, but every step you take leads you closer. And that is still one step closer to success or whatever it is that you may want to make it. And knowing that you have that much power and that you only have a finite amount of time before you reach the end of that path, I was hoping to encourage and inspire people to look at it with glee, to make the most out of that path, to take the path less traveled, in a sense, because life is what you make of it. And oftentimes, even when you spend so much time down in life, you could be up very, very soon. But I think that is pretty much everything I have for today. I wanted to say thank you again for listening, and I will see you next episode.